Hello. In this video, we are looking at Ratana Sutta, verse 9. Ye arya saccani vibhavayanti gambira panyena sudesitani kinchapite hunti bhusampamatta nate bhavang artam adiyanti idampi sanghe ratanam panitang etena saccena suvatti hotu. And I call up the text. Here we are. Ye arya saccani vibhavayanti gambira panyena sudesitani kinchapite hunti bhusambhamatta nate bhavang artamang adiyanti idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena saccena suvatti hotu. So, ye um, who, those who, but literally just who on its own. So those who vibhavayanti arya satchani. Vibhavayanti, uh, if we're just looking for a translation, it's something like understand, realize, cognize. I'll deal with the word in more depth in a moment. Those who vibhavayanti arya satchani, the noble truths, or as for example Professor Peter Harvey has put it, truths for the ennobled ones. Sudesitani gambhira panyena, well taught. That's the desita, the dish root that we studied in a previous verse in this sutta. This is a neuter plural here, satcham, in the singular truth, satchani, neuter plural truths. So sudesitani, to agree with the Sachani truths. Gambhira panyena. Gambhira means deep, and just as in English and indeed Latin, profundus, profound, deep, it can have, or it originally had a literal meaning, a deep hole, a deep well, deep water, and then by extension, deep as in deep learning, deep wisdom. So that imagery of physical depth being transposed into depth of learning or depth of wisdom, we see as identical between Sanskrit and Pali, and the modern languages of Europe. And I suspect a great many other languages too have used that imagery. So panya, wisdom, which is the Sanskrit prajna, the root jna, knowing, prajna in Sanskrit, knowing through something, that is, knowing not just the surface, but knowing through it. Um, so it's knowledge in depth or understanding in depth, as opposed to just surface understanding. Emphasized here, gambhira panyena, by him of deep wisdom. I'll bring up the iPad here. Here we are. Panya, the Vedic root jna, cognate with our English, to know. The Greek gnosis, knowledge. Oops, and for example, we have it in cognoscere in Latin, which comes into English as cognize. So our English know, because we've lost the pronunciation of the K, though we still write it. Greek gnosis, cognize, jna in Vedic, the root. So prajna as a noun means literally knowing through it, knowing forth into it. And this is, I don't know why it's doing this. And this gives us the Pali by regular phonetic mutation, panya, prajna, panya, same word. It's the same word, incidentally, as came into Greek as prognosis, which we have in English as a medical prognosis. The difference there being that this prefix pro in Greek here has the meaning of for, F-O-R-E letters, in advance. So prognosis meaning knowing in advance, of being able to tell what will happen, which is exactly how we use the word prognosis. That the same prefix becomes a pre in Latin, as in to predict, to say in advance, which is virtually the same as knowing and saying in advance. It's a foreknowledge of what will happen. Now, here we have Gambhira Panya. Gambhira, deep. Now we have this word Panya, which we are going to make the second element of a compound. This is a possessive compound. So Gambhira Panya, deep knowledge, means in this particular form of compound, the possessive compound means one whose knowledge is deep, one possessed of, knowledge, wisdom, one whose wisdom is deep. Now, we've got this noun panya, feminine noun ending in a long a. When it forms the second member of a compound, it now behaves like any other ordinary adjective. It loses its long a and becomes gambhira panya. It now declines like an adjective and a short a like any other. And that accounts for the form that we see here, which is the instrumental form of the akaranta shabda, that's the words ending in a short a, by the deep wisdom, by him of deep wisdom. So those who vibhavayanti, those who cognize, it's a really interesting word, this. We see it in various contexts. It's the root bhu, to be, with the prefix vi, which is we've typically described it as the separative prefix. We have, so it means the separative prefix, the idea meaning out or away. It can mean either getting rid of something, or it can also mean coming out, either throwing something out or out, as in blossoming out. Incidentally, the Sanskrit for a shoot, as in the shoots that come out of trees and the ground in spring, is a shaka, or branch also. Branch or twig is a shaka in Sanskrit. So the vishaka is the out branching. That's what gave its name to the month Vaishakha in Sanskrit, which becomes Vesakha in Pali, and in the Thai pronunciation Vesak or Wesak. And it so happens that I'm doing this recording on the day before the Wesak celebration 2026. So the Wesak, the out shooting, the out branching. So Vibhu, we have the expression, the thirsts, the cravings. Bhava, by the way, is one of the verbal nouns of the root bhu. Vibhava, we have bhavatanha, the thirst or the craving for becoming, being / becoming. And vibhava, the unbeing, getting rid of being, that's been widely interpreted according to, right across two opposite ends of a spectrum. Vibhava, Vibhava Tanha has been interpreted as the craving for totally getting rid of existence, the craving not to exist at all, like a self-annihilation craving at one end of the spectrum. And at the other end of the spectrum, it has been interpreted as vibhava, just wanting things to be otherwise than what they are. I don't quite like the situation I'm in now. I wish it were a bit different. Now, these different interpretations, let me just to adjust my camera here for a moment. There we are. These different interpretations, so it's not quite right. There we are. These different interpretations are not mutually exclusive, I maintain. That the thirst for unbeing can indeed range from anything from some trivial irritation, like a fly buzzing around the room and you wish it were elsewhere, right at one trivial end of the spectrum, right up to the craving for one's own annihilation at the other. That's vibhava. Now, the root, I'm going to call up Monia Williams for you so we can see what it originally was in Sanskrit. Here we are. Vibhu, vibhavati, to arise, be developed, to out, to be, to, other words, to come into existence or take on a form, a particular temporary existence of some particular form out of something else. So it has its own separate being for a bit, be developed, manifest, expand, appear, and to pervade. And then causative vibhavayati, and that's the form that we see in this verse. Let me call it up. Where are we? Here we are. Vibhavayanti, it's that same form. So let me just call back Many Williams again. Oops, sorry. Oh no, here we are. So vibhavayati, to cause to appear, literally to make something appear, to make something out be, or develop, manifest, show forth, or display, and by extension to perceive distinctly. So you can bring something into existence, or you can bring it into existence in your own mind. See now, this is the imagery that's used here, and that's the meaning that it has in this verse. Ye arya satchani vibhavayanti, those who bring forth in their minds the noble truths. In other words, make them a reality, bring them into existence, not just as words they've heard in the air or words they've seen on paper, but bring it into existence as a real thing in their own minds. And that's how ascertain, know, acknowledge, and recognize. And in Pali, so we've got this continuing problem with reducing the screen for me, and now we've even lost tech. I don't know why it's done this. Let's see if it give it to me. Vibhava, power, wealth, prosperity, and then non-existent cessation of life, annihilation. Okay, that's one extreme interpretation. Now the causative form, vibhaveti, in Sanskrit vibhavayati, Pali vibhaveti, plural vibhavayanti, to understand clearly. So literally, to produce intensively or well, to bring it into being, to make it out be, to make it exist. Incidentally, um, um, Oops, sorry. Here we are. Even the word exist actually is, has something of the same background to it, because we've got the Latin sto stare, which is the Vedic root sta, to stand. So Latin sto, I stand, stare, to stand. Um, it's actually a duplicated root in Sanskrit, and not stati, but tishtati, which in Pali becomes tittati. Not exactly slightly irregular. It was a part duplication of the of the um, of the root. Latin actually does the same thing as an alternative word for to stand, which is sistere. So from stare, sistere, sta tishtati, Sanskrit, stare sistere in Latin. Now, that also just means literally to stand, rather like stare, or basic meaning stand. In fact, our English word stand, stand is from the same root. And um, so I've lost my train of thought for a moment. That's right, ex sistere. Oops. Oh, sorry, just pause for a moment. There we are. Ex sistere literally means to outstand, to exist. In other words, rather than just being something of an undifferentiated mass, if something exists, it stands out. It's something that's observably separable, can be viewed as an existing thing, outstanding thing, separate from its surroundings. And existere, when the word, by the phonetics of Latin, the S drops out. Existere, and of course it comes into English then as just exist, but it's to outstand, to stand out, to be. We have other words with sister, to consist. If something is inconsistent, two inconsistent statements, they consist to stand with something. They can't both stand together, meaning they can't be true at the same time. And if what you do is consistent, if what you say is consistent with something else, it means it can stand with it. They're both true at the same time. So this vibhavayati has this meaning of to make something exist, and therefore to bring it in as a lived reality in your life, to bring the noble truths as a lived reality. So ye riasacchani vibhavayanti gambhira panyena sudesitani kinchapi te hunti bhusam pamatta nate bhavang attamamadiyanti. Note here in this verse, you've got the anuswara before a vowel, bhavang attamam, but here you've got no anuswara, attamadiyanti, not attamang adiyanti, but attamamadiyanti. That's done purely for the sake of the meter. In Pali, you have the option where you get a word ending in an M, and the next one begins with a vowel. You have the option either to have the anuswara or not. The important difference is that if it is the anuswara, the anuswara is always pronounced always makes the syllable heavy. So bhavang attamam, not bhavamattamam, bhavang attamam. So the syllable, so bhavang attamam, short, bhavang, long, double T, so therefore long. By contrast, attamamadiyanti, attamama, short, because it's a short vowel, single consonant followed directly by a vowel. Is there a rule as to when it's anuswara and when it's not? The answer is no. In Pali, it is optional. In prose, you tend to find the anuswara. I think I'm right in saying. Please feel free to tell me if I'm wrong. In prose, you tend to see the anuswara before a following vowel. Um, in poetry, it's basically done as a matter of meter. If the poet wants a long vowel, he'll make an anuswara of it. If he wants a short vowel, he will not make an anuswara of it, treat it as a regular M. I should mention that in Sanskrit, that option does not exist. If we get a word ending in an M, the rule is it becomes, if the following word begins with a consonant, it's anuswara and so written. If the following word is a vowel, it's never anuswara, it's always just M. It becomes a regular consonantal M followed by the vowel. So in Sanskrit, that option does not exist, to have one or the other at your choice. So, kinchapi, they. So the te correlates with ye. Ye, who, or those who vibhavayanti the Arya Sachane. Te, they, means those same people I've just been describing in the first line. Te, kinchapi hunti pamatta. Kinchapi means however, however in the sense of however bad, however, followed by an adjective, however heedless, however pamatta they are. So, kinchapi, if we break this down, kim means what, cha and api, even. I've so literally, and even what, or and even whatever is the literal breakdown. The word kim, basically meaning what, can also mean how. So kin and even how, meaning it's their way of saying however much you have done something. So kinchapi. So kinchapi te hunti bhusampamata. However much they are extremely heedless, meaning however pamata, however heedless they may be. Bhusam, just brisham in Sanskrit, just means extremely or very greatly. So, however heedless they may be, nate bhavang artamamadiyanti, they do not adiyanti take, so da to give, ada to take. They do not take an attamam bhavang, an eighth existence. So bhava here, it's from the same root, of course, as vibhavayanti and vibhava, from the root bhu, to be. There are two separate verbal nouns from the root bhu. One is bhava, and another bhava. There are other forms as well, but let's look at these two. Bhava, they aren't strictly differentiated, but you will frequently find that bhava is used more in the sense of not just being, but becoming, entering into a new life, whereas bhava tends to mean like a state of being. So tunhi, quiet, tunhi bhava, the state of being quiet, just being in silence. Here, bhava means effectively means taking on a new human birth or a new birth as a sentient being. So nate bhavang attamam adyanti, they will not take an eighth existence. In other words, um, once you reach this point of being doesn't say it explicitly here, but a stream enterer, those who have actually realized the Arya Sachani, the noble truths for themselves, those who've made it a reality for themselves, nate adyanti, they will not take an attamam bhavang, an eighth existence. So once you reach that point, however heedless, however unmindful you might be, once you've reached that point, according to Buddhist doctrine, you've got no more than 7 lifetimes to come. And the last line, reflecting the previous last lines in the sutta, idampi sanghe ratanam panitang etena satchena suvattihutu. This too is an exquisite jewel in the Sangha. Etena satchena, by this truth. It's the same as the satchani there. Nominative singular. Well, it's nominative and accusative because it's a neuter noun, which is always the same for the nominative and the accusative. Satcham, instrumental singular. Satchena, nominative and accusative plural. Satchani. So, etena satchena, by this truth, suvattihutu, may there be well-being. So I will read it through again. Ye arya satchani vibhavayanti gambhira panyena sudesitani kinchapite hunti pusampamatta nate bhavang arthamamadiyanti idampi sanghe ratanam panitang etena satchena suvattihutu. And that's it on this video.